I'm now going to hand over to our roundtable speakers, David, Bell and Kathy, who are from the National Mining Museum, are going to kick us off. And then we'll hear from Lindsay Nielsen, who's from the National Museum of Scotland. And then Rosie Wiley, who is from Historic Environment Scotland. And then finally, Natalie Miller from Museums Gallery Scotland, who's also here with a volunteer called Fizzer. So if I could ask you each of you to introduce yourselves in more detail if you want to, and speak for about 5 minutes or so about your approach to volunteer development. And then, yeah, it'd be really great to hear about from Kathy and Fizzer as well. Over to you, David. Are you going to kick us off?
As usual, I was on mute. Hi everyone, I'm David. I'm the Assistant Curator at the National Mining Museum of Scotland. I'm going to describe our basic approach to volunteer development, focusing in particular on the part our recruitment process plays. So for us, the starting point is our application form. I'm sure it's not perfect, but what it aims to do is ensure that before we meet up with a potential volunteer, we know several things. We know what the volunteer's motivation is, why they want to join us. We know a bit about their general experience, whether that be studying, employment, or simply their life experience. And we want to know that they have a broad understanding of the sorts of opportunities that we will be offering. Paz, if you could put the first slide up, please. Oh, it's there, thank you very much. So I think this is key. A potential volunteer can clearly see from this list, which we put in as part of the application form, the range of tasks that they will be or might be involved in. And they can highlight any that they're particularly interested in, or they might actually think, oh, this isn't really what I was expecting. I'm maybe more interested in a different sort of public-facing role, you know, so they might actually be thinking this isn't the opportunity I was really looking for. And when a potential volunteer sends through an application, we invite them to meet us at the museum. So this gives us an opportunity to discuss more fully what our volunteers do and to explore in a bit more detail the information that they've provided on their application form. We also at this point share what we expect from volunteers and what they should expect from us. So if I can have the next slide, please, Baz. And yeah, you'll see that we ask volunteers to take part in training. And we also promise that the museum will support their development. So from a very early stage in this process, we're making sure a potential volunteer knows that development opportunities are available. In addition, on that first introductory sort of visit, they have a chance to look around the museum itself and maybe join a guided tour. And at this point, if everyone's happy, then we would agree a start date. Next slide, please, Baz. Now this is a lot more recruitment than development, but I think as part of the whole process of introducing new people to the new volunteers to our organisation, I thought it'd be useful to put in. So the first day will involve familiarising themselves with our buildings and people and assigning them their first task. And I think personally this checklist is really useful to ensure that we've covered the basics, particularly health and safety aspects. So development from this point on is normally pretty informal. We'll check in on progress, we'll ask if they're happy in their work and get a feel for the sorts of tasks that they are suited to. And we're helped here in that invariably we're working in the same building and usually in the same room as our volunteers. We can quickly see how they're getting on with the task, whether they need support, etc. Now, sometimes we will go a step further. If a volunteer has joined us because they're interested in a career in museums and heritage, then we'll put together a basic development plan. And if we can have the final slide, that's great, thank you. So as you can see, it's very straightforward. And it looks to ensure that over a set period, the volunteer has undertaken specific tasks common to working in a collections team. So to summarize, I'd say that development begins with the recruitment process itself. And then I'd encourage you to think about this in terms of what your application form and early discussions can do to shape the development of individual volunteers. Okay, thanks for your time there. I'm now going to pass on to Kathy to briefly describe her experience volunteering with us.
Unmute. Right, can you hear me? Yes? Oh yeah, I can't hear you. Okay, so yeah, so I got in touch with David years ago before lockdown. So it was the Christmas before lockdown, and I really wanted to get some more museum experience. I was already volunteering at a place in Edinburgh, and actually one thing that I'd like to add to what David said about the sort of process was that I found it really accessible to make contact with the National Mining Museum from their website, because their website very clearly said, oh, we welcome volunteers, and here's the contact. So I was straight in there. So it was really nice to be able to make that initial contact. And then, as David said, I came in to meet him, and yeah, I saw the list of all the different jobs that they do, and I was interested in all of those. I said, yeah, anything. So basically, I started in January 2020. I got about 3 or 4 weeks in, a day a week before lockdown. But even in that very short time, I was, you know, I was doing a real variety of tasks, such as finding photographs, doing a bit of research into a pit pony, what was it, a sort of medal about treating pit ponies well. And then I was just about to start accessioning when lockdown hit. So it was like, oh no, you know, I just felt like I was just getting into it. And I also attended, which was really useful, one of the museum's in-service training days. So that meant that I could meet all the staff and just get a feel for the place. And what I would really say is that I very much felt like it doesn't feel like it's them and us, and the volunteers are treated differently. I really felt that I was sort of part of it. So I really liked that. And then lockdown, and in fact, so it's been about 2 years later, actually. I would have come back sooner, but I had to have some medical treatment. So 2 years later, what was really strange was the first day I came back, I thought, well, I wonder what I'll be doing. And I thought it'd be really good to do some accessioning, because that's what I just started. And lo and behold, that's what I did on my first day. So that was really nice. So it felt like those 2 years just disappeared. And basically, I feel that I get a lot from coming here. I've actually just started with some paid work, a sort of temporary part-time job in Preston Grange, actually, at Industrial Heritage Museum. But I very much want to keep this on, because I feel I'm learning a lot. So I'm keeping this on as well. And I feel that the paid staff, the curator team, are really, it's basically sort of ongoing training. For when they're giving me a new task, they'll train me up in what I'm expected to do. I tend to write notes for everything anyway, so I write it all down. And I'm also always really amazed that they never look annoyed when I ask them a question. So, you know, if ever I ask a question, I think, oh no, they're so busy, but they're always really happy to come and help. So I just feel really lucky that I'm getting, I feel like I'm getting training here, and I just hope that in some way, some tiny way, well, I did get rid of 2 bumblebees today in the office, so maybe I am helping them in some practical ways, and making cups of tea as well as trying to do, you know, hopefully doing a little bit of work for them. What else? I think that's everything I was going to say. Is that the right sort of? Is that okay? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kath.
Okay.
Really great. And I think bumblebee removal should definitely be on your CV from now on, because you never know when you're going to need that skill. But thank you so much, David and Kathy. Kathy, it's great that you're bringing what David was talking about to life. So thank you very much for that. Lindsay, are you okay to go next?
Yeah, that's fine. Vaz, are you able to pop the slide up? Thank you. So hi everyone, lovely to see you all today. I'm Lindsay Nielsen, and I'm the Youth Engagement Officer at the National Museum of Scotland. So the project specifically, the volunteering opportunity that I'm talking about today, is called Scotland 365, and this is funded by the National Heritage Lottery Kick the Dust Fund, and it's aimed at engaging 16 to 25-year-olds across the museum and heritage sector. Now, I've been in post for just over a year now, and my role has been specifically to support our young volunteers, in which we call them the Youth Engagement Team, and this is in partnership with Young Scot. Now, this volunteer role slightly differs from the National Museum's usual volunteer offer. This is very much project-based. However, it's a great opportunity for us to test new ways of working, and we're utilising a co-design methodology. I'll just get you to move on to the next slide. So I'm going to cover our light touch approach. So I've came up with kind of 5 key topic areas, so I'll briefly introduce them. And this photo here is just a picture of our young volunteers on one of their digital Zoom calls. So we recruited young people across Scotland using Young Scot's digital platform and using Young Scot's network. So just over a year ago, we received 100 applications from young people across Scotland. We then invited 60 of the 100 young people to attend an online selection day. And then from that, we whittled it down to 32 16 to 25-year-olds who were then recruited across the National Museum and Young Scot as volunteers. And as you know, recruitment paperwork can be quite tricky, so we tried to simplify the process, given that young people were volunteering across 2 organisations. So we merged paperwork. So we came up with a National Museum and Young Scot handbook, and we asked young people to sign up to a joint volunteer agreement. And this process was carried out in collaboration with our volunteer coordinator, and I think Debbie is on the event today. However, volunteers were also required to fill in other volunteer paperwork, so they were supported by myself and other colleagues to apply for disclosure certificates, fill in equality paperwork, and a library registration, so they could get their email and ID badge, and also access to volunteer benefits. So on completion of all the paperwork, 32 young people came on board as young volunteers across 5 projects. And then the young people then self-selected across the 5 projects, which were dedicated visitor experience, National Museum of Flight, marketing, meaningful engagement, and organisation sector development. So in terms of communication, we had to swiftly move our communication lines due to COVID and the nature of the online volunteering opportunities. So we had to be very creative in order for us to kind of maximise our engagement with young people. So we communicated with young people over Basecamp, which is a digital platform that we use to communicate with staff and young people. We were able to post up our meeting dates, our notes and session plans. And young people also use this platform as a social space and for peer support. Like I said, Zoom was the preferred video conferencing platform, and all our activity took part over Zoom, and this was facilitated and led by our partners Young Scot. We kept Zoom calls to a minimum to avoid digital fatigue. We offered regular breaks and social time, and on occasions we also offered a Just Eat voucher, so young people could take part in eating a pizza during some of our digital sessions, and that went down very well, as it did with staff. In terms of support and supervision, this was really key to the success of the project. So we offered regular monthly check-in meetings with our young volunteers, whereby volunteers came together as whole groups in order to see their peers just as a touch base. And we also included a fun icebreaker activity as part of this kind of group support and supervision. One-to-one support and supervision was also offered for volunteers, so they had an opportunity to meet with myself and the project manager. Although informal, it was a really great opportunity for volunteers just to air some of their concerns, an opportunity to look at kind of skills development, and offer any additional support as required. And many of our volunteers took up this opportunity and found it really useful. Also, at the end of any online session, we gave our volunteers an opportunity to feedback anonymously. So we designed Mentimeters, where the young volunteers could then give us some insight into how we could make improvements for sessions in the future. And this just meant that they could be really open and honest with us, and they didn't obviously have to say who the comments came from. And this allowed us to change and adapt our approach. As well as having support from myself and young Scott, the young volunteers were also part of small project teams, which meant they also had the expertise among professional staff across the museum, so they could ask for support and advice at any time, and in which they did actually take that opportunity to do that. In terms of training and development, there was no formal requirement during the recruitment process for young volunteers to have any, formal skills or qualifications. However, we did offer evaluation training, and this was delivered from our external partners, Research Scotland, and volunteers learn valuable skills on qualitative and quantitative methods. And this proved extremely helpful in the project teams as young people utilised these skills in developing focus groups and surveys as part of kind of audience development. Across the projects, volunteers gained valuable skills in working alongside marketing agencies. They were designing and testing out a marketing campaign for a 16+ audience. Young people learn events management skills, and they delivered and designed an escape room experience event at the National Museum of Flight. They also gained insight into a user experience role, where they created a digital prototype for their fashion galleries. And other informal training included photography and exhibitions and design. So they've been very busy. In terms of our exit strategy, we're now 1 year into the project, and it's just about to come to an end. And the volunteers have been involved in a vigorous evaluation process, working in collaboration with staff to produce reports and recommendations. And they're also developing and facilitating workshops, as well as helping NMS staff to refresh the current youth engagement strategy. So in order to facilitate this, we've offered a 3-month extension for a small project team. From the 31 young people, 9 young people have put themselves forward to volunteer to help us to communicate the learning across the organisation and the wider sector. And this will include a series of workshops and presentations. So when the funding comes to an end in June, all the 365 volunteers will continue to stay on as volunteers for up to 2 years with Young Scott, but this is voluntary, so it's up to them to opt in and out. And the young volunteers will be welcome to apply for the generic NMS volunteer offer. And just to say on their achievements over the past 12 months, our 32 volunteers have amounted up to 890 volunteer hours across the last year. Last slide, Gaz. And unfortunately, our volunteers are really busy with exams in uni right now, so I couldn't get anyone to come along. But I just thought I'd leave you with some quotes for you to read from our young volunteers. Thank you, and happy to take any questions at the end.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Lovely to have those quotes about the impact of being involved in the project. Rosie, are you happy to go next?
Yeah, sure. So hi everybody, my name is Rosie Wiley. I'm the Community Engagement Manager with Historic Environment Scotland, and part of that role is having the corporate lead for volunteering in HES, as I'll now go on to say. I'm also the Vice Chair of Make Your Mark. I'm an independent assessor for the Investing in Volunteer Awards, and as of last week became the Interim Vice Chair of Volunteer Scotland, and I'm part of the Volunteering for All Action Plan Delivery group for Scottish Government. So wearing a few hats and open to any questions or discussions around those topics. So it's quite a big topic in an organisation with the scale of Historic Environment Scotland. We're the lead body for the historic environment in Scotland. And so I want to just touch on the development approach that we took in 2015 in terms of the phased approach that we took, and then just a wee focus on how we work with individual volunteers who are tour guides in terms of how they have ownership and develop their own content to share with visitors. So back in 2015, HES was actually two organisations, Historic Scotland and the Royal Commission on Ancient and Historical Monuments of Scotland. And we merged in 2015 due to a new Historic Environment Act that came out. So at the time, those two organisations only had volunteers in the Ranger Service and in the archives in John Sinclair House. So we wanted to develop on a national scale, but we wanted to take a very careful and phased approach, because Historic Scotland was formerly a civil service and volunteering wasn't really part of that national organisation. So we had to be really careful in terms of how we worked with staff and how we rolled that out so that everybody understood that volunteering was about community engagement and participation and wasn't anything about job displacement and that sort of thing. So first of all, we worked with existing friends groups in communities that were already there, that staff already were familiar with and worked with. The second phase was about engaging volunteers at events, so at our big public events on Lithgow Palace, Calaverock, Fort George, and then we looked at rolling out visitor engaging roles throughout the country at the visitor attractions. And as a result, we now have, what are we, 5, 7, just 6 years on from that. So we now have volunteers who engage with the Ranger Service, conservation tasks, tour guides, visitor activities, musicians, meet and greet roles, events, archives, gardeners at the engine shed, archaeology in our youth forum in partnership with Young Scot, and micro volunteering through the National Record of the Historic Environment. I'm really glad I wrote that down in notes before I tried to say that. So pre-pandemic, we had 900 volunteers. We now have 46. So the pandemic really took a brush through a lot of the activities that we have, because a lot of it was out at the attractions in public facing roles and such like. So closed down very quickly. And some of our sites haven't even actually reopened, or they've reopened and then they've had to close again. So we need to do quite a lot of work to regrow that programme. And I'm actually joined by Joanna Todd, who is going to be our new volunteer development manager and supporting us in that journey in HES. But in terms of the tour guide approach, so as I say, in that phased approach, we really wanted to kind of work with individuals in terms of how should we do the development, to think about personal motivations, interests, and kind of passions, different passions around the country. And so we wanted to work with our staff at the visitor attractions to understand engaging volunteers, what sort of roles do you think would be of most interest to our visitors, but also what would support staff in that kind of wish list and allow them to do a little bit more. And what came out was tour guides. Now, a lot of the time when you go for volunteering, you know, I've done tour guiding myself, you're given a script and you stick to that and a route and a topic and such like, and that's great. But we wanted to trial, because with our phased approach, everything was about trialing, getting evaluation, and then carrying on. So we decided that we wanted to trial when we did our recruitment for tour guides to say, you know, at this site, if you have a passion and a specific interest, so that might be a specific part of the site, it might be a period in history. We've got tours now about religious context and the wider landscape, so not necessarily the site itself, but what visitors can see from the top of the battlements, wildlife, so lots of different topics. So individuals came forward with that kind of offer of, we can give you access to do your own research and support to go out into the community and find out different parts of what interests you. And then we worked with our collections team, cultural resources team and interpretation team to build an approach for writing these tours. The volunteer would do it, and then that would get kind of looked at and signed off, if you like, by those teams to make sure that individuals where it was factually accurate and kind of matched along with the site that they were going to be in. So that went well, and we now have a suite of tours called the secret stories tours. Things that we learned with that approach, though, is it took a lot longer than we were anticipating, because some people took a real deep dive into the topics, as you would expect. Also, though, it is time consuming to do that. So individuals were fitting that in around other commitments and such like. And then our colleagues having to sign off these tours, that was in addition to what they were already doing in very busy roles. So we just kind of went with the flow, and we had to keep saying, well, we're not going to have tour guides at this site when we anticipated, because things are still happening in terms of the tour content. But in terms of adjustments that we made for that volunteer kind of development action was about recruitment. So we started to do some recruitment at the start of the winter when some sites were closed or there wasn't many visitors anyway. And so people would create their tours and have it signed off, ready for training to then have the visitor season ready for the summer. And that's kind of one of the main things that we learned from that. We've got some tour guides back now, which is great. But again, only I think 2 sites out of 10 perhaps, so we need to look at regrowing that, but we'll continue the approach of that kind of what's your personal interest, what's your motivations, and share that with the visitors, because feedback from visitors is that they really love the personal kind of touch and excitement that comes through from the individuals when they're talking about, you know, that specific thing, rather than a big broad range at an attraction. So that's kind of quite important thing for
Rosie,
us.
thank you. Can I remind you of time? Thank you.
That's how I'm done.
Oh, brilliant. That was a perfect interruption then. We've invited Rosie along with kind of 2 hats on, because as well as working for HES, Rosie volunteered for HES, and which led her to working for them, I believe, and also volunteers in other capacities. So we thought we'd get Rosie to also talk about her perspective and the skills that she developed as, and is still developing as, a volunteer. So can I give you a few minutes to talk about that?
Yep, of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I am, I mean, we all are that are in this call, big advocates for volunteering for a big range of reasons. For me specifically, I am quite a big advocate, along with the, you know, the kind of personal well-being and social enjoyment of volunteering. For me, about personal development, and really advocate for volunteering being a way of trying different sectors, different roles, different organizations. It's a great way to put your toe in the water and then possibly stay. So I've been a volunteer for years. I think when I was about 16, maybe, I started volunteering for the Red Cross. I volunteered for different riding clubs. I have horses, and that was a way of me sort of getting some early skills in terms of events and getting a bit of confidence in terms of working with others and having responsibility. And I then also have an interest in conservation. My degree is sustainable environmental management, and I wanted to be a park ranger, but that is quite hard to get into when you don't have experience, I found. So I initially volunteered for as many ranger services as I could. I was really busy, a busy bee at the time. But because I did that, counting flowers in Holyrood Park, you didn't have to have any prior experience to do that, which then gave me experience to become a volunteer ranger, because you had to have a wee bit of experience to be a volunteer ranger, which then gave me experience to get a seasonal post for the summer, which then got me experience to get a permanent post as a park ranger. When I was in the ranger service, I was given responsibility for developing their volunteer program. But part of that experience, I was really clear about CPD that I felt that I needed in the role. And so I got to do training, and now I have qualifications through Volunteer Scotland. So again, it's that kind of really important, I think, in volunteering to look at what, you know, how you can be supported by that organisation in terms of what your needs are. So for me, though, that was once I was employed rather than being the volunteer. But my experience of being a volunteer was that you really had to have a volunteer manager that was quite clear on the values of volunteering and could kind of influence in different parts of the organisation. So having those qualifications really helped me, which then went on to being able to do that phased approach for the volunteer development for the organisation, which then led to becoming an IIV assessor with the Investing in Volunteers Award. And then those experiences collectively allowed me to join the board of Volunteer Scotland, to be elected onto that. And I believe that if I hadn't tried as much volunteering when I had the opportunities to do so in the different organisations, I wouldn't be on the career path that I am now. So As I say, I'm a big advocate for it, but obviously there's, you know, a lot of work to do, and the kind of at the heart of Make Your Mark is about that inclusion and diversity development. And when I was a volunteer, actually, there wasn't that emphasis on it, and it wasn't that easy to get into volunteering, and I had the means to do so. And if I hadn't, I'm not sure that I would have been able to go on the journey that I am now. So, you know, lots of, I mean, I'm straying on to different topics here, Gabrielle, so I'm going to stop talking now.
Thanks, Rosie. It's all relevant, and I was about to say yes. I mean, volunteering is obviously opens up so many opportunities for people, but how do we make sure that volunteering itself is accessible? And that, you're right, that is at the core of Make Your Mark. But so we'll now hear from Natalie and Fiza. We've heard about some more light touch approaches to developing volunteers' skills and offering experiences. Natalie's going to talk about something that's probably kind of at the other end of the spectrum, that's much more formalized. But we really wanted to give a range of ways of developing volunteers' skills. So over to you, Natalie. Thank you.
Can you see my screen okay properly?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm just going to briefly speak because Fiza is also going to tell us about her experience participating on the project, which is a lot more interesting than the kind of waffle that you'll hear from me for this part. But if you bear with me, I'll kind of explain the kind of context of the project. So I am Natalie, and I run the Upskilling and Celebrating Volunteers project here at Museum Galleries Scotland. And this is a project that started in 2020, so right in time for the pandemic, but we persisted anyway. And the project is a project that was jointly funded between the Scottish Government and Museum Galleries Scotland. So this was basically a pilot programme that was intending to help the Scottish Government's culture strategy objectives to strengthen culture through skills development. And the idea behind the project was to increase local participation and inclusivity in the voluntary and museum sector through the recruitment of new volunteers to undertake impactful projects in museums. So we recruited 8 volunteers, and they were based at these organisations that you can see on the screen. So we've got Historic Environment Scotland, based at Trinity House in Edinburgh. We've got St Andrews Heritage Museum and Gardens, the David Livingstone Bathplace Museum, where Fiza was based, which is in Blantyre. We've got Aberdeen Archives, Galleries and Museums, as well as the National Trust for Scotland, based at Course, Fife, and the Football Museum, based here in Glasgow. So as part of this project, the host organisations were essentially asked to nominate a member of staff to undertake a qualification called the L&D 9DI. And this qualification essentially means that they become trained assessors. So these members of staff gain their qualification while assessing the volunteers that were recruited as part of the project, who are undertaking a qualification called the SVQ in Museum Galleries Practice. So this qualification was developed in partnership between Creative and Cultural Skills Sector Council, as well as the Scottish Qualifications Authority. It is the equivalent of an advanced higher or first year of university, and it usually takes about a year to 18 months to complete. So through this qualification, the volunteer is able to develop and demonstrate their understanding of the museum gallery sector by completing practical work-based tasks and gaining specific skills that they are then assessed on. So the nature of the qualification means that it can be adapted to any learner of any needs, and there's also no prerequisite for the qualification. So you could apply to be part of this, this volunteering opportunity, regardless of what qualifications you had already. And in order to be able to gain their qualification and show enough competency to get the SVQ Museum Galleries Practice, volunteers had to commit at least 2 days a month to volunteering, as well as additional days at home to complete their assessments. And this, because we did start in the middle of the pandemic, was a combination of at-person and remote volunteering, as well as assessment opportunities. So in addition to these 2 days, they did, as I said, do additional time for their assessments, as well as meeting with their in-house assessor and Museum Galleries Practice mentor, really. So as I said, Fiza was one of the 8 participants that we had as part of the project, and I will pass you over to Fiza.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Hello, everyone. My name is Fiza. I'm working towards to gaining the SVQ in Museum and Galleries Practice Qualification for Upskilling and Celebrating Volunteers project at David Livingstone Birthplace, as Natalie mentioned, since September 2020. So I started as a volunteer at David Livingstone Birthplace for this qualification and have been working on improving my skills, confidence, learning about heritage and museum sector. So my interest in visiting historical places and museums was igniting after visiting different museums and heritage places in Scotland, and I felt the need to include, diverse ethnic groups in Glasgow's many wonderful historical and cultural sites and their attendance. So in 2020, when this opportunity came up, I signed up for this because I have keen interest in museum and history, and I also love that. The first thing that really attracted me to sign up for this qualification was the character strength that David Livingstone exhibited during his life. And the other thing that really fascinated about this museum is a hidden gem. Not many people know about it, including me. So not coming from the museum background, I initially found it very challenging to understand the sector. In addition to the barriers I faced, I was encouraged to take on this qualification to pursue my dream career at the museum with the dedication and supportive of the support of the staff at David Livingstone Birthplace. But my perseverance, passion for knowledge, hard work, and my thirst for knowledge kept me going. So what I'm getting out of it is just last year, David Livingstone Birthplace Museum opened their doors. So I got this opportunity to attend in-person trainings, collection training, storytelling training, and tour development training. This qualification has helped me to achieve my goals at my own pace. Being a mom of two beautiful children, it can be very challenging to find time to do something that you really enjoy. But because of the flexibility of this qualification and support from my assessors, it has opened endless opportunities for me in the heritage sector. Also, it has helped me to understand the museum sector in a way that I can pass this valuable skills and knowledge to my children, friends, and family and wider community to help them develop their interest in heritage sector. Through this qualification, I have been given this amazing opportunity to work with the assessors from David Livingstone Birthplace and Historic Environment Scotland. And I've also joined the Museum Association membership to continuously work on my professional development. I also work as a project coordinator for the Freedom in Abstraction project, Power and Creativity project for a charity called Empowerment for Change. So Thistles and Dandelion was our first heritage project last year. That started in 2020 in lockdown. So last year we organized a trip with the help of the staff at David Livingstone Birthplace. So I gave a brief tour of the museum, which was a huge milestone for me in reaching my goals to become more aware of the heritage environment. So in February 2022, I was employed part-time by David Livingstone Birthplace as a youth engagement assistant. Being the first person in my family to work at the museum has given me insight of dreams, of my passion. If you work hard and if you're in the environment with like-minded people, you can achieve if you work hard for it. So at the moment, I'm creating the tour for my qualification. See, the purpose of this tour is to, to research, to talk about the untold stories of women who played an important role in shaping David's life and expeditions. And we see the barriers I faced, it's a childcare and, expectations and pressures of society. So this qualification had made it possible to achieve my goals in my own time, without neglecting my, family. And obviously the travel expenses were paid, and I've been offered digital devices as well, which was really helpful. So I'm grateful to the staff at David Livingstone Birthplace and Natalie for always being so welcoming, helpful, and supportive. Thank you so much. Your continuous support has made things easier for me, and I'm really enjoying being a part of such an amazing and strong team. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunities within the heritage and museum sector to grow productively. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Fiza, for sharing that. It's really great to hear about your experience and how, despite it being such I guess I thought of it as quite a structured program where you are getting qualifications, there's still that flexibility that's allowed you to deal with all the other responsibilities in your life. And I love what you said about the skills that you've learned are getting passed on to the community as well. So we think about volunteer development as being for our volunteers, but actually it has this kind of ripple, I guess. Thank you all so much for your contributions.